Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Allcarnews, and we're here with the 2024 Cadillac XT4 Sport in this gorgeous tri-coat red paint here, coming in at just over $50,000. This is a pretty much almost fully loaded Cadillac XT4, and of course it is facelifted for the 2024 model year. We have this new grille design, new headlight design, and this incredible new display inside lifted from the Cadillac Lyriq. But does it help the XT4 compete against a super crowded segment of vehicles in this class? We have things like the BMW X1, the Mercedes GLA, the Volvo XC40, and a whole host of other vehicles like the Audi Q3 and even more. And this is a very hot competitive segment, and I think these upgrades on the XT4 really make it a unique competitor in this class, though I still think it needs to improve in a few other areas to really make it class leading. So how has this XT4 been treating me over the past week? I will go show you guys that in this video right now, as well as taking you on a full tour of this 2024 XT4 Sport and all the cool features around it. Let's go dive in. And before we go take a review of this Cadillac XT4, let's go find out what's happening underneath the hood, because this powertrain should be a little bit better than it is. Okay, everyone, under the hood here we have a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine that is of course turbocharged and is making, if I can open the hood, around 235-ish horsepower and just around 250 pound-feet of torque. It's paired to a 9-speed automatic gearbox, as well as to a twin-clutch all-wheel drive system. So typically when you start the vehicle, it's going to be in front-wheel drive. If you need all-wheel drive, you just press the little switch and it pops it into all-wheel drive. It's not really kind of like a Cadillac system or a, I guess, transfer case four-wheel drive system. It's this interesting multi-clutch unit, but it does appear that you do have to put it into all-wheel drive when you do want it to work. How has this powertrain been over this past week? It's been okay. I really do wish GM offered some sort of like mild hybrid system or a hybrid system, as pretty much a lot of the competitors are moving towards things like that, or even just a little bit more power would be nice as well, or just even like advanced kind of like 12-volt system to kind of help with energy recuperation, because fuel economy hasn't been too great. And we did take this thing over a road trip over this past week, and I got around 23 to 25 miles per gallon in two-wheel drive mode. That's front-wheel drive mode, actually. A comparable BMW X1, for example, could be seeing over 32, 35 miles per gallon on its typical similar highway route, which is something to note there, as well as a Volvo XC40, which does come with a mild hybrid system attached to it. Generally though, this powertrain is fine for what it is. I wish the engine was a little bit more refined and better sounding for this price point, as well as for this class. Transmission is pretty smooth though. If you try to kind of be sporty with it, as this is an XT4 Sport, it really doesn't like to be sporty, but we'll get to a lot of that in our driving impressions later down the road. Okay guys, let's take a tour around this Cadillac XT4 now for 2024, and like I said, up front is pretty much where all of your changes are going to be found. As you can see here, we have this really sleek new design language that Cadillac has kind of applied to the front end, and primarily the big changes with these headlights here. Gone are the kind of blended in headlights, and we kind of have this now very complicated style, this kind of split headlight design. You can see our indicator light is up here, and this is going to be our main daytime running light beam running vertically just like Cadillacs do. We have our projector LED beam located in this kind of lower little area down here. It's an interesting unit of a design. I think it looks pretty nice, very sleek, but I honestly do prefer the previous pre-facelifted version of the XT4. I think it looks a little bit cleaner. This is just a little bit busy looking. We can see here we have the XT4 and the XT4 Sport trim. That is going to get us this blacked out grille up front here, and the grille has been reshaped as well for the 2024 model year. It's a little bit slimmer, a little bit more sporty, and of course it is blacked out for this trim. I do really appreciate though how Cadillac has given the XT4 black kind of trim around the vehicle and not some kind of cheaper looking plastic. You can see down here we are getting that black gloss trim here, and this kind of nicely sculpted lower kind of bumper and diffuser area. Even on these kind of covers here down here, we have this kind of cool little design theme going on there, kind of playing with Cadillac's logo. Even like this little design here in the headlight cluster here, there's a little bit of a crest shape going on there. So I like that little bit of a continuity of design that Cadillac is doing on this front end. It's a very clean and sporty looking vehicle. I think it's one of the best looking vehicles in this class, honestly, and especially with these 20-inch wheels you can get on the XT4 now. I believe these are new for 2024, but I think they look really fantastic. They really fill out the wheel arches very well. It makes it look like a nice premium vehicle. Now, these are not standard, like I said, they are an option, and they are coming on these Continental all-season tires we have here, which honestly have been pretty good over this past week. It's been snowing, it's been icy, and I really have not had any issues, especially with this all-wheel drive system. I do like the little Cadillac badge on the side here. It's in this kind of monochromatic Cadillac design, which you can actually get for the front and rear of the Cadillac Cadillac badges as well, which is an option. We do have body colored side mirrors here, completely body colored with a little bit of an LED repeater on here and a camera here, part of our 360-degree camera system. Though coming up to the front of the XT4, I will note, and this is a huge omission, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I don't believe there are parking sensors on the front of the XT4. Yes, we have a front camera, but over this past week, I've never kind of found any sort of parking sensor turn on for the front of the XT4, which I think is a little bit disappointing for a vehicle over $50,000. There are parking sensors in the rear, and we do have a 360-degree view camera system, but let me know what you guys think in the comments here if we should have front parking sensors as well, because I think that's kind of a necessity at this price point, especially in this class. Coming around to the rear here of the XT4, we can see not much has actually changed for this 2024 facelift. A lot of the changes we've had on this vehicle are on the front end, which is perfectly fine. I do love the rear end of the XT4. It's one of my favorite parts of it, with those signature Cadillac taillights we have back here that just look so cool. They kind of remind me a little bit of like a Volvo-esque taillight, but I think it looks great on the Cadillac over here. We have two exhaust tips out back here, and they are real with kind of blended finishers into the bottom of the bumper here. And again, we can see these full LED taillights here that are blinking now with our hazard lights on, but you can see this entire beam will illuminate for you, which is nice. There's even a little Cadillac crest up in the taillights. There's a nice little Easter egg touch there, and I think it's just a nice compact design we have back here. Our rear brake light will be located down there. We also have two cameras back here, actually. So up here is for our mirror camera, and it has a little washer on it, which is nice. We also have a camera back here for our reversing camera, which is a nice touch here. And overall, generally, I think the XT4 is a pretty good looking vehicle from the rear. We also have our fuel filler cap back here. Now, they do recommend premium fuel, though I have been putting 87 octane in this thing, which works perfectly fine and is okay to put in the XT4, but you will notice a little bit of a reduced power output possibly by putting in a lower grade fuel. Okay, let's go check out the rear storage capacity to the XT4 now. We have our Cadillac key fob right here, which is pretty nice looking. I think it's a nice looking key fob. If it can focus here on the camera, possibly, maybe not. But we can see here we have our trunk opening button here, so we're gonna just press that twice, open up our power tailgate. Thankfully it is powered. And we can see we have a nice amount of space back here, which I really appreciate. Pretty typical, which I think you're going to find in this class, though. Once we get inside, you'll see it's just a little bit more roomier than some of the other competitors here. We do have a floor cover here with this really nice thick carpeting with LED lights back here, which is a nice touch as well. Now under here, I thought there was going to be more storage, but it looks like there is supposed to be like a spare tire maybe for some of the models. I don't think this 20-inch one wheels will get a spare tire. You can see we have a tire inflator in here, but I guess you could kind of remove that and put some things in here to store stuff, some little bit of extra storage. We do have this cargo cover here, which is removable, thankfully, if you don't want that. And of course the seats do fold down for a little bit more additional storage, but it's a generally pretty nice rear cargo space area. The kind of entry level height is a little bit on the higher end, so you might have to kind of lift up some things to get in. We do have these little scuff plates, which already look like they have been kind of scratched just a little bit. There's like a deep scratch in them. I'm not sure how that happened on that car, but it's a pretty nice trunk space, and it is a full power operation, so we can see we can just close it up just like that pretty easily. And it's a quick power tailgate as well. One thing that does annoy me on all new Cadillacs, though, is their new badging nomenclature, because I honestly think it's just a little silly. It's this one's called the 350T. It's the only engine I guess you can get in the XT4, though what it is the torque number in Newton meters rounded up, which is just a strange thing. A lot of the other manufacturers have been kind of going away with their number-based systems, or at least just going to something a little bit more common, but Cadillac kind of went with this. It's a little confusing, but that's what you're gonna have to be getting on all of the Cadillac models these days. Okay guys, let's go take a tour of the rear end of the XT4 now, because it's a pretty spacious rear cabin. And you can see that now you will know that all four doors do have kind of the keyless access functionality here, though it's a little bit on the older end style where it's not a touch-based system. You do have to kind of press this button every time to unlock and unlock the vehicle, which is fine, but you do have that ability here. Checking out a real quick look at this cabin here. Pretty decent amount of opening space here. Now it doesn't really open too far for the door, so you can kind of see here it's a little bit more of an angled entrance, and I do like how tall the XT4 is. You kind of see it has that really flat roof, and we'll see why that's a benefit in a second, but let's hop inside. Hopping in on the passenger section right here, shutting up the door real quick. Nice solid thing here. We have pretty big windows back here, again, kind of fitting with that boxy design, so you never really feel too cramped back here. The interior is pretty nice. We have a black leather interior. The whole panel up here is wrapped in this nice material with this blue stitching. I'm not sure if this is going to come across on camera here, which feels really nice. We have a speaker back here as part of our AKG audio system here. No Bose in this particular XT4. We have carbon fiber trim over here, some metal accents, a nice soft armrest here, some storage, a nice aluminum, or I think it's aluminum, door pull opener right here, which is a really nice touch. And we have a little bit of some storage here, though. All the plastics down here do get a little bit more on the cheaper end. Now this seat is a little bit further back, but you can see we have a cargo cubby back here, as well as on the driver's side. We have 2 air vents back here, as well as heated seats for our rear passengers, USB-C and A port. We also have a center console here with 2 cup holders, which is a nice touch here. And of course, the seats do fold down to get access into the trunk if you need a little bit more space. This funky looking headrest up here, you can kind of see that blue stitching just a little bit better up here, which looks quite nice. A little bit of a Cadillac V logo here. And these seats themselves are actually very comfortable. They do hug you quite well. The kind of lower area is nice. It doesn't feel too uncomfortable. It's good sculpture. I don't feel cramped. It is a little bit on the tighter end back here, though, as you can probably tell. Again, I could move this front seat up just a little bit more, but it's a little bit on the cramped side. And same thing with goes on the driver's side. It can be a little bit on the cramped side, though. Again, these seats can move up just a little bit more. But one of the big things about the XT4 is that the sunroof is absolutely massive. And it goes all the way back here, and it really does help to open up the cabin just a little bit. Though I will say, I can't really fit back here, actually. I'm putting my head completely back right now, and I can't actually put my hand in between where my head and the roof is. I'm going to flip the camera around so you guys can see this. So I'm sitting completely back right now, and my head is completely hitting the roof, if you guys can see that here. And I think that's because of this panoramic roof. There's a big rail here. That's kind of where the seat is sitting, and I actually can't even sit completely straight going up because of that. I would have to kind of either sit in the center here or kind of lean my head in a little bit like this. Otherwise, we're going to have a little bit of an uncomfortable situation here. So this rear seat, honestly, if you're over 6 feet tall, you're really not going to want to sit back here. Or if you are 6 feet tall like myself, you might even still have a hard time sitting back here. So you might want to pop in a front passenger seat here, or maybe drive the XT4 if you want to sit in the center. But then you're going to have this little bit of a hump here on the floor, which is going to kind of reduce your legroom just a little bit. But it looks big from the exterior, but inside it's a little bit on the smaller end for the rear passenger seats. And while we are back here, we can get a quick little look at this updated front cabin, which we're going to go take a look at now. This is really the main highlight of the XT4's facelift here. It's this absolutely massive front screen. So let's go have a tour of that right now. Getting inside the XT4, we have the aluminum side sill plate here. No all-weather floor mats on this one, which honestly would have been something nice to have because it is a little bit wet out. Closing up the door here, nice solid thunk. We can have a little bit of a welcome animation here coming on this gigantic display here. Check that out. And we just start the vehicle here with our start button, and it powers to life for you pretty quickly. Really like that. And here we are in the interior of the 2024 XT4, guys. Check this place out. So what is new for 2024? Well, it's the dash. This is this massive curved display here. I don't believe it's actually OLED. I think it's an LED display. I think it's like a 9,000 or 9K resolution, which is impressive. And it's a love and hate relationship with this display, which I'll get to in this review here, but it looks really gorgeous, which is kind of the main highlight here. I think that was what Cadillac was going with here. Now we can also note up here, we have this heads-up display unit right here, which is really cool, kind of how it's blended into the dash here. It is on right now. You can kind of see it on camera. It's a little bit difficult to see there, but that's a nice other use of displays in this vehicle. Steering wheel, I believe, is a carryover design. It's an okay steering wheel. It's really not my favorite whatsoever. The material around it doesn't feel super premium, actually. There's like a little bit of a perforation going on the hand sides, but I wish it could feel a little bit nicer. Would have been nice to see some of that blue stitching on it that we see throughout the interior. Also, this airbag cover just feels a little bit on the cheaper end. Same thing goes with these buttons we find in a lot of other GM products. Paddle shifters, unfortunately, also do not feel nice whatsoever. They're very plasticky. They feel very cheap, and they do not work very well as paddle shifters, which we'll get to in the driving review. We have automatic headlights and wiper controls, which is nice, thankfully. We also have this button here that will actually clean our rear view mirror and camera, which is really nice. So we have this rear camera as a mirror here, and that can be cleaned via a little spray nozzle back there, which is a fantastic touch. The general design of this interior is fine, I think. We have a nice blend of materials up on the dash. We have this little accent here. We have blue stitching, a little bit of a faux suede, micro suede material here. And that's actually carried over onto the seats. Up for the front passenger and driver here, we have the leather perforated. We also have that nice contrasting material here, which is a nice soft Alcantara style material here, and then more blue stitching than we find in the rear seats. And these seats up here are heated and ventilated, which is fantastic. They do get quite cold actually if you do use the ventilated cooling option as well, which is a nice touch. We do have our hazard switch here. This is like a rear parking assist. I call it that because I can't find any parking sensors up front. Also lane keep assist as well, which is a really nice touch. And I think generally it's a nice looking interior. I do like this little Cadillac pattern going on up here with this stitching design. This is actually LED illuminated at night over here, which is a cool little touch. We have the Cadillac logo on here, blue stitching on the dash, which is nice, and a very slim area for our air vents. So generally, again, design in here is nice. Just some of the little details get a little bit iffy sometimes. I like the climate controls are separate from the infotainment system, though there is still a climate menu in here, which you can't actually access from any button. So you have to press the climate button to get in there. And another weird thing in here, which I just don't understand, is that we have all these seating controls over here, which are nice. So for example, if I'm trying to change something on the seats, you can't change it when the screen comes up. So it says this message, use the controller on your seat to adjust this feature. So you have to use seat controllers to adjust all the seat controls, which is weird. We have a massage function. I'm going to call it massage with the quotes there because it really doesn't massage. This is, I don't believe this at all. It feels like it's just poking me. It's just moving the lumbar in and out. But at least you have the feature. It's just not very good, I would say. The center console is nice. You have a little bit more some side storage over here. A lot of nice padding. We have this little opening cubby here. We have a USB-C and A port, as well as a 12-volt socket. And the quality actually is quite nice in here. I haven't really found any too big issues. Big manual shifter here. Drive manual mode. You can put it into neutral and reverse, which is nice, as well as our park mode. Cup holders here are a decent size. They could be a little bit bigger, and there's not too much of like adjustment here, which could be annoying if you have a bigger drink. We have a wireless charger over here. We can open up this huge center console here. I don't know why it's so long. It's really big. You can open it though. We have a little bit of a storage tray up here, and we have some more storage down here. You can see this wireless charging mat is fitted right here. It does get a little bit on the warmer end. That's pretty much with all wireless chargers. We have our drive mode selector here, traction control, and auto stop start function, which is nice. We also have some physical controls here for our infotainment system, which are metal, which do feel quite nice to the touch. They're cold. The volume knob here as well, and some hotkeys, which is a nice little touch. Honestly, it's a little bit confusing sometimes to control this infotainment display with this physical knob. Not all of the controls are pretty fluid sometimes, which can be a little annoying. But it does take some time to get used to. And I guess if you don't want to touch it all the time and get this thing all fingerprinty, you could use this little physical display here, or physical knob here on this dash here. Now, it's an interesting layout. So on this left-hand side here, we have these three little panels here. So we have our gauge display here, so we can keep on this gauge. We can put a map display here, which actually will pull Apple Maps as well, in addition to Google Maps, and a clean kind of calm display here, which is just our speed. We can also put this little screen here for our trip information. We can have trip 1 and trip 2, as well as just a calm screen. I've been using trip 1 for this trip, and we've been doing around 22.4 mpg. So again, hasn't been the most fuel efficient thing. We also have controls for our heads up display, which we can find up there, which is really fun as well. So again, nice controls on this side. And then again, we have our infotainment system here, which in itself is pretty quick. It's running off like an Android-based operating system. We have built-in Google Maps, My Cadillac stuff. We have OnStar connectivity in here, Sirius XM. And the Maps for Google does take up this full display here, which is really nice, pretty quick. And when you do throw on Apple CarPlay, it's kind of closes off a lot of this display. It doesn't really take up the whole thing, which is a little bit annoying, but that's something you're gonna have to deal with here. And I do like this vehicle status display here. Hopefully it loads. Sometimes it gets stuck, but we have this full XT4 here. You can kind of rotate around and press different areas on it to kind of control, which is really nice. So the graphics and the processing on here are actually quite good. I just noticed some glitches here and there. And my biggest issue, I think, with this whole screen layout is that I can't see the screen. I just can't see it from where I'm sitting. I've tried every different position. I don't know if it's this hole here isn't big enough, but I know on camera you might be able to see it, but I'm going to try to put it from where my eyes are right now. This whole area gets blocked off. Half of this gets blocked off, and I've tried everything, and the only way I can get it to work is if I'm sitting in this really uncomfortable position that I don't want to be sitting in, and then I can see the display. And let's say for maps, for example, here's my eye level. This whole piece gets cut off, and yes, I could try to lean down or something, but that's just dangerous while you're driving. So I think this display definitely was an afterthought in the sense that it was added in the facelift. It's a gorgeous display. It is very curved, as you can see from the passenger seat here. Sometimes the passenger might have to lean over actually to kind of touch some of the stuff on the display because of the curve. On the display here, you can kind of see that curvature going all the way across it. And that's really meant to kind of have this part angled more towards the driver over here, which is good for the driver. But I would just wish this whole area was a little bit easier to see. And this is not a Cadillac exclusive issue. This has been an issue with Porsches, as well as the new Lucid Air has had this problem as well, with kind of making this viewing area big enough to kind of view the entire display. So that's just one thing I've noted over this week of driving in here. We also have our controls up here for our rear shade, and as well as our top shade up here. We also have a little bit of a sunglass control here, and not too much else is going on in this interior. We have our AKG audio speakers up here, which is an okay system. But my biggest, I think, complaint in here, other than the screen, is just that the materials in here just don't feel as premium and as nice as something you would expect in this class. There's a lot of the GM parts bin stuff in here, from the buttons on the switchgear, especially this button right here we find in pretty much every GM product, and it just doesn't feel super high end. This is one of the things I did say in the CT5 V Sport I had a few months ago. They actually did a little bit of a better job in that car of making it more unique, but I just wish some of the things in here felt a little bit more premium, especially for the price point. That's just something I've noted in here. And one other thing I do want to touch on is this drive mode selector here. So you can see right now we always default into two-wheel drive mode. I haven't really found a way to kind of make all-wheel drive on all the time, so I think that's how it's going to default. So you press it once to turn on all-wheel drive. And this is another thing I'm noting right now. You just watch me press this button. This is, I think, a GM thing. I can press buttons sometimes, and they just don't work all the time. You have to really press it hard to get a action out of them. Now we're in sport mode, which locks it in all-wheel drive, and then we can put it into, there's an off-road mode, and there's also a just regular Tour two-wheel drive mode. There we go with the button again. And it goes back into the Tour, switching back to two-wheel drive right there. And those are really your drive modes in the XT4. Okay, guys, enough with this review on this interior. Let's go take this thing on a drive and see how it is out on the road. It gets up to speed pretty well. The thing is, though, is that it kind of falls off on a cliff after you get up to speed there. I'm going to pop it into Apple CarPlay here, because it actually does look quite nice with Apple CarPlay on. You can see how it takes up this display. And what's just cool is I could actually have Apple Maps displayed on my dash up here. You can see now it's displaying Apple Maps instead of Google Maps up here, which is really nice. I may not be able to see the whole thing, but it is up there, which is cool. It also will do turn-by-turn directions in our heads-up display. But anyways, it kind of falls off a little bit of a cliff sometimes after getting up to speed, and I just think that this engine needs a little bit more power. I think it also has to do with this 9-speed automatic gearbox. It's just tuned more for efficiency, not really for any kind of sportier driving performance, even in the sport mode that we're in now. I will say that sport mode does make it feel a little bit more peppy around town. It kind of gives you a more throttle input, a little more of a sensitive throttle applications on a day-to-day basis. Otherwise, in the Tour modes, it's a little bit more smoother and comforting, but that's about it in terms of sportiness with the XT4. It has great looks, I think, on the exterior. I like this display now. It kind of is a class-leading display in terms of its technology in here, but it's still lacking a lot of features generally compared to a lot of the competition, like a BMW X1, Volvo XC40. A lot of those vehicles are now offering more efficient powertrains, more power, and a little bit more just in general day-to-day usages, especially with this all-wheel drive system here. I think a lot of people in this class are going to want a full-time all-wheel drive system, not something that you're going to have to kind of put into all-wheel drive on like when you need it, which is interesting. And another thing to note is that a lot of these other vehicles, such as these main kind of competitors I'm pointing at as X1 or a Volvo XC40, are getting way better fuel economy than this, with just a little bit more power and like standard or full-time kind of all-wheel drive, which is really interesting to note here. So I think the XT4 could use a good thorough ground-up reworking, but this facelift is definitely a nice upgrade from what we had previously. Like I said, it gets up to speed pretty well. We have blind spot, pretty good rear blind spot, and just general tracking sensors back there. It works really well with kind of pedestrian detection and a lot of other systems. I just wish the front end was just as covered with all these safety systems as the rear end of the vehicle is. Out here on the highway, I have to say it's actually quite quiet. The XT4 has pretty well sound insulation in here. I think it does really well on the highway in terms of kind of absorbing a lot of the sounds. One of my bigger complaints though with the XT4, and I think it actually has to do with this 20-inch wheel option, is that I think the wheels are just too big for this car, and as well as the suspension's just on the firmer end of what you're gonna find in a lot of vehicles in this class. And I think that's gonna be a little bit annoying over some driving conditions, especially with these larger wheels. If you're gonna bump over some broken pavement stuff here, it's gonna let a little bit more noises into the cabin. You kind of feel it a little bit in your back and your spine, just a little bit going over some bumps, which can be a little unsettling sometimes. Just going over like this lanes here, there's some broken pavement here, you kind of feel it a little bit, especially hear it in the wheels as well. So that's one thing you may have to know about the XT4, and it is on the firmer side of just being a vehicle in general as well, which unfortunately doesn't really help it. I think it could be a little bit more beneficial if this had a softer suspension tuning. It isn't a particularly sporty vehicle, so I think if Cadillac went with a softer tuning, I don't think it really would be to the detriment of this vehicle. Steering is on the firmer end, but I really don't have any kind of feel of going on with it. It just doesn't feel super luxurious or high end of a driving experience, which is something you would expect hopefully for something at over $50,000. I think its closest driving and handling characteristics I've noticed with it is, in terms of competitors, is with the Volvo XC40 actually. And even that I think has a little bit more pep in its step. This might be feel a little bit more controlled than an XC40, but that feels definitely a little more of a premium vehicle actually than this to drive. Now out here on the highway, I'm gonna pop it back into tour mode and two-wheel drive, and on the highway sometimes on some occasions it will actually do active fuel management. So I think it shuts off a cylinder to kind of help you improve your fuel economy just as little bit, as much as possible as you could. But that doesn't happen all the time. You can kind of monitor that when you go into your fuel economy settings over on your control display over here in the center infotainment system. And the Super Cruise is not available on XT4s whatsoever as of right now. Maybe on the next generation of the XT4 we could see a sort of Super Cruise, or if it goes EV or something like that. But right now we just have regular adaptive cruise control, and it isn't the best system actually. It's a pretty basic system, so I can operate it pretty easily. I'm going to just go back to our gauges here so you can kind of see what it looks like on my display when we're kind of turning on these cruise control systems. So I literally can just press this button here. It's now active. I pressed set here, and now our speed is set. We got a little gauge up here popping on that cruise braking is on. If you want to turn on regular cruise control, you just press the button again. So we are on cruise control now, and it doesn't really have any of the advanced systems you would kind of expect at this higher end price point. Sometimes even some mainstream vehicles come with like full steering assist standard these days now, which is, I think all vehicles should be having that. So we do have lane keep assist, so it's gonna kind of like pogo stick you between the lanes, and that's what I quite literally mean. So once it sees the lanes, it'll kind of veer to a side, bounce you back over, veer to that side, bounce you back over. It's not going to keep you centered in these lanes. It's really just a lane keep assist function. And the adaptive cruise control itself honestly has not been my favorite. It works obviously fine when you're just cruising along, but let's say a vehicle pops up in front of you, it never really recognizes that vehicle, and it honestly feels a little bit unsafe in some conditions. It doesn't feel like it's recognizing the vehicle. It doesn't slow down. You kind of feel like you're accelerating into that other vehicle sometimes, and I'm not going to try to replicate it because it's a little bit on the scarier end, but that's one thing I have noticed with the XT4s, just regular adaptive cruise system. You can adjust your gap distance here with 3 different settings, so if you want to change that, that's pretty easy to do. See how it handles this. We're in all-wheel drive now, and you know, taking this corner at speed, you can kind of get, if you do ever end up driving a XT4 or taking out on a test drive, you can kind of get that experience of what I'm feeling like here. It just doesn't feel very sporty. How this kind of chassis is set up, it's shorter and taller a chassis, and I think what that's doing for the XT4 is just, it's not really making it a sporty chassis to be kind of set up like that, and it's sharing a platform with things like the Buick Envision, a Chevy Malibu, which aren't inherently sporty vehicles to begin with. So I think they've tried their best of what they could do with this platform, and you can kind of feel those limits pretty easily when you just take it around a corner. It feels a little bit skippy and hoppy over a little bit of bumps and undulations. You don't feel like you have the best amount of control going through a corner. There isn't too much body roll because the suspension is just so firm, but that kind of translates into a lot of unsettling motions when you're kind of going around those situations there. Otherwise, guys, it's been a pretty interesting week with the XT4. I've always wanted to drive one of these vehicles. I've loved how it looks over just the past few years it's been out, and you know, while it looks fantastic, the screen looks visually really nice, and it's generally nice to use, there's just a lot of weird ergonomic quirks in here that I just cannot get over, especially with the fuel economy, especially with the power and just the driving dynamics of the XT4. I don't think it was living up to what I was expecting it to be, and I'm not saying it's a bad vehicle. It's pretty comfortable. You are getting a lot of features. It honestly, it feels very well built at the end of the day, but at this price point, I think there are just so many better competitors that I think if I were going to be spending my money, they would be going to one of those versus this XT4. Regardless of how much I do like the looks of this thing, it just doesn't check off all the boxes for me particularly. Anyways, guys, if you are looking in the market for XT4, I would definitely go check one out at your local Cadillac dealer. Maybe even hop into a higher end XT5 or wait for something even better coming from Cadillac down the road, because honestly, I think even the CT4 sedan is a fantastic choice over this XT4. That's going to really offer you some better driving dynamics with that rear-wheel drive chassis on there on the Alpha platform. Nonetheless, this has been my impressions over this past week with the Cadillac XT4, and I hope you guys enjoyed my review video and POV drive. And as always, stay tuned for more coming from Allcarnews. Cheers.